You must lose yourself to truly be yourself. A Buddhist and philosophy view. Chapter 1. The constructed self and its illusions. Have you ever truly paused and asked yourself, who am I, beyond the many things I do every day? You might be a parent, a student, a worker, a friend. We take on these different roles, moving through life, often without questioning if the person underneath is still truly us. The idea of losing yourself to be yourself sounds like a puzzle, but it points to a deep truth about how we often build a version of ourselves that is not quite real. There is a concept in psychology often called the false self. Think of it as a way we learn to behave to fit in, to meet expectations, to be accepted. From a young age, we learn what makes others happy, what keeps us safe, what helps us succeed. This outer self allows us to function in the world. However, if we live too much through this built-up way of being, we can slowly, gently, forget the authentic part of ourselves. The real spontaneous spirit, the one that holds our unique voice and true feelings, can become quiet, almost hidden behind the practiced actions. Buddhism speaks to a similar yet deeper idea. It calls this tendency ātagāha, which means self-attachment. This is the strong habit of holding on to the idea, I am this, or this belongs to me. It is not just about physical things, but also about our thoughts, our feelings, our views, and even our identity. We cling to ideas like, I am smart, I am successful, I am a good person, or I am a spiritual person. This clinging creates fixed ideas about who we are. We build a story, a label, an image, and then we mistakenly believe this limited story is the whole truth about us. This attachment to a fixed self shapes how we see the world, often creating a sense of separation and limitation. Philosophers, too, have explored this human tendency. Thinkers like Søren Kierkegaard and Jean-Paul Sartre talked about self-deception. This is when we live as if we are only our social roles. I am just a cashier, or I am just a CEO. We avoid the freedom and responsibility that comes with being a conscious human being. We might choose the comfort of a clear role over the sometimes difficult openness of true freedom. When we do this, we limit our own possibilities, trading the vibrant truth of who we are for the safety of a familiar, often smaller, identity. We can see this in our daily lives. Consider a person who is very successful in their career. They receive praise, promotions, and all the signs of achievement. Yet inside, they might feel a constant stress, a deep emptiness, or a quiet longing for something undefined. They have become so completely the successful worker that the vibrant, curious individual, with their simple joys and innate wisdom, has faded from view. Or take someone deeply committed to a spiritual path who strives to be the perfect Buddhist. They might follow every rule, read every text, and speak with calm words. But if this striving comes from a rigid image of themselves, it can lead to great inner pressure, judgment towards themselves and others, and a loss of the very genuine kindness and expansive freedom that the path intends to offer. In trying to reach an ideal, they might lose the natural, easy flow of their own being. This built-up self, if we do not notice its quiet influence, can slowly, gently lead us far from our true, unburdened nature. It can become a familiar place, a kind of cage built by our own hands, where we gradually forget the boundless space, the deep peace, and the inherent wisdom that truly defines us. Chapter 2. The Pain of Holding On. Why Clinging Hurts. We often find ourselves holding on to names, ideas, and feelings with surprising strength. Why do we cling so tightly to these concepts of who we are, to the images we have built? It is a bit like clutching a handful of sand. The harder we squeeze, the more it slips through our fingers, yet we keep holding on. This deep grip, this profound tendency to hold on to things, is called upadana in Buddhism. It is more than just having something. It is about clinging to it, making it a part of our perceived identity. And this clinging, the Buddha taught, is the very root cause of suffering, or dukkha. We hold on because it offers a sense of safety, a known definition of ourselves, even if that definition is built on shifting ground. It feels like security in a world that often feels uncertain. But what happens when the very ground we stand on begins to shake? Imagine the moment when the idea of "I am" is challenged. Perhaps you have always seen yourself as the strong one for your family, or the brilliant student, or the reliable friend. Then, suddenly, a situation arises that makes that role impossible to maintain. A family crisis, an unexpected failure, a moment of deep vulnerability. The image of who you thought you were begins to crack. This is when the pain truly begins. When we lose a role, a job, a relationship, it is not just the external event that hurts. It is the deep feeling of losing a part of who we are. The suffering comes from the identity we built around that role, now gone. The Buddha's teachings offer a profound insight into this. In the Anattalakkhana Sutta, a key text, the Buddha speaks clearly. This body is not me. These feelings are not me. These perceptions are not me. These mental formations are not me. This consciousness is not me. These words are not meant to make us feel empty, but to show us that what we cling to as self is constantly changing. It is a reminder that nothing we grasp, no single part of our experience, is a fixed, permanent self. When we try to hold on to what is always moving, pain arises. Philosophers too have looked at this deep human fear. Thinkers like Martin Heidegger and Søren Kierkegaard spoke of a profound angst, a deep unease or dread that comes when we face the uncertainty of our own existence. It is the fear of losing ourself, or realizing that ourself is not as solid as we thought. This fear, though uncomfortable, can be a first, necessary step. It is a moment of truth, showing us that the self we have constructed is not stable. It is not permanent. Consider real-life moments that shatter our sense of self. Losing a job you identified with completely can leave you feeling lost, without direction, wondering, who am I now? A breakup, especially after many years, can feel like losing a piece of your own soul, because your identity was so tied to being part of a couple. These events are painful not just because of the external change, but because they shake the very foundation of who we are. They force us to confront the question, if I am no longer that, then what am I? Holding on to these fixed ideas of self for too long causes deep, ongoing pain. But letting go, especially suddenly, can feel terrifying. It is like stepping off a cliff into the unknown. We are afraid of the emptiness, afraid of not knowing who we will be without the old definitions. So, how do we navigate this delicate balance? When does true safety lie in holding on, And when does genuine freedom begin with letting go? Chapter 3. When to hold on, when to let go. Holding on often feels safe, like clutching a lifeline in a rough sea. Yet, true freedom, genuine peace, seems to come only when we dare to let go. How do we make sense of this puzzle, this deep paradox in our lives? Perhaps the answer lies in understanding that there are different ways to see self. We can think of two kinds of self. First, there is the relative self. This is the self you know in daily life, your unique personality, the roles you play as a parent, a teacher, a friend. It includes your sense of right and wrong, the good habits you have built that help you live well and interact with the world. This relative self is useful. It helps you navigate daily situations, make decisions, and connect with others. It is the self that learns, grows, and builds relationships. Then there is the true self, or as Buddhism points to, the state of no self, anatta, and the inherent Buddha nature. This is not an empty space or a void. Instead, it is a pure, open awareness, a fundamental ground of being that exists beyond all labels, roles, and stories. It is the deep, quiet knowing that simply is before any thought, feeling, or identity arises. It is the boundless potential, the clear mirror that reflects all of life without judgment, without needing to define or hold on to anything. So, when do we hold on? It is not about letting go of everything at all times. In moments of crisis, deep loss, or great change, when the world feels uncertain and chaotic, we do not simply drop everything. This is when we need to hold on to certain things with kindness and mindfulness. Sati. We hold on to our core values, our inner strength, our compassion for ourselves and for those around us. We hold on to the thread of awareness that reminds us to breathe, to stay present, to act with care and clear intention. Imagine being caught in a storm. You do not let go of the boat entirely. Instead, you hold on to a small light, a steady flame of awareness to guide you through the darkness. You hold on to the intention to be kind, to act with wisdom, even when fear is present or confusion clouds your mind. And when do we let go? We let go when the mind is calm enough, when we have enough mindfulness to see clearly. This is when we can gently release the images we have of ourselves, the constant need to always be right, the endless striving to be someone or something better. We might even let go of the idea, I am a Buddhist, or I am a spiritual person, if that idea becomes another form of clinging, another label that limits our natural openness. Think of an old Buddhist story. A person uses a raft to cross a river. Once they reach the other shore, they do not carry the raft on their back. They leave it behind. The raft was useful for crossing, but it is no longer needed. In the same way, the concepts, ideas, and even the spiritual practices we use to learn and grow eventually need to be released so we can experience the direct truth, the freedom that lies beyond all concepts and definitions. Philosophers also offer wisdom here. Epictetus, a Stoic thinker, wisely observed, "It is not things that upset us, but how we see them." He taught us to hold on to what we can control, our values, our actions, our inner responses, and to let go of what we cannot control, external events, other people's opinions, the past, the future. This is a powerful way to find inner peace and stability. Jiddu Krishnamurti, another profound thinker, spoke of freedom beginning when you let go of all images of yourself. He meant not just the images we present to others, but the subtle, internal images we hold about who we are. When those images dissolve, a vast, open space of true freedom appears, allowing us to simply be. So, the path is not about rigidly choosing only to hold on or only to let go. It is a subtle dance, a delicate art of living. It is about listening carefully to each moment, to the quiet whispers of our own experience, and understanding what is truly needed. It is about discerning when a firm, mindful grip is wise, and when a gentle, liberating release is the path to freedom. Chapter 4. From Preaching to Presence. When we gain some insight, when we begin to see clearly on this path, there can be a strong impulse to share what we have found. We might feel a certain clarity, a new understanding, and a desire to help others see it too. This is a natural human response when we encounter something valuable. However, this impulse can subtly shift. Instead of simply sharing from a place of open heart, we might find ourselves wanting to teach, to fix others, or to tell them what they should do. This is where a quiet danger lies, something often called the spiritual ego. It is not as obvious as a loud, proud ego. Instead, it is a subtle mask, a refined form of the self we discussed earlier, now dressed in spiritual clothing. It is the subtle feeling that I know the way, or I am further along than others. This creates a sense of control, a need to guide or correct others based on our own understanding. The harm in this approach is real. When we try to preach or fix, we often create a distance between ourselves and others. We might judge them, or see their struggles as problems to be solved by our wisdom. This is not true connection. Buddhism teaches that the Dharma, the truth, cannot be forced. The seed of Dharma, like any seed, only grows when the conditions are right. Pakaya. You cannot force a flower to bloom. You can only provide the right soil, water, and sunlight. Similarly, we can only create the conditions for understanding in others, not make them understand. This calls for patience, deep respect for each person's own path, and an understanding that everyone unfolds in their own time and way. Philosophers also speak to this. Martin Buber, for example, talked about two ways of relating to others: I-it and I-thou. When we are in an I-it relationship, we see the other person as an object, a problem to be solved, or simply a recipient for our knowledge. This is the mindset of preaching. But when we are in an I-thou relationship, we meet the other person as a whole, unique being. There is mutual respect, openness, and a true seeing of the other as they are, without agenda or hidden motives. This is the goal of genuine human connection. So, how do we shift from the urge to preach to a state of true presence? It begins with simply listening, not listening to respond, not listening to find flaws, but listening to truly hear what the other person is saying, feeling, and experiencing. It is about being with kindness, metta. This means simply being present with warmth, acceptance, and compassion, without needing to change anything or impose our views. It is less about what we say, and more about how we are. Think of a silent teacher, someone whose very presence teaches more than any words. Their calm, their wisdom, Their kindness radiates naturally. They do not need to give a lecture. Their way of being is the teaching itself. This is the power of true presence, letting go of the need to control or fix, and embracing a genuine connection that allows truth to emerge naturally in every interaction. Chapter 5. Losing yourself to truly be yourself. When we speak of losing yourself to truly be yourself, we are not talking about vanishing into an empty void. This profound idea points instead to allowing the layers of the constructed self, the limited ideas and roles we have built around ourselves, to gently dissolve. When that happens, something else takes its place. A vast, pure awareness, a clear and boundless space within. This is not an intellectual concept alone. It is something we can feel and experience directly. Think of a moment of deep silence. True silence is not boring or empty. It is rich, full, and alive. It is a space where the mind chatter quiets, and a deeper sense of peace becomes clear. Or consider gratitude that arises without a specific reason, not for a gift or a kind word, but simply for the breath, for the light, for the simple fact of being alive. This pure gratitude comes from a place beyond our usual thoughts and expectations. And then there is freedom without a goal, not freedom from something or freedom to do something, but just a feeling of spaciousness, of unburdened being. These are moments when the limited self steps aside and pure awareness, our true nature, shines through without effort. Great teachers have spoken of this in different ways. Thich Nhat Hanh, a beloved Buddhist master, taught that there is no self and other, only connection. He meant that when we drop the fixed idea of me as separate from you, we begin to see the deep interconnectedness of all life. We realize that we are part of a larger tapestry, not a disconnected thread. Similarly, Alan Watts, a philosopher who helped bring Eastern thought to the West, used a beautiful image. You are the ocean, not just a small wave. We often think of ourselves as individual waves, separate and distinct. But a wave is only a temporary form of the ocean itself. When we realize we are the ocean, the vastness, the depth, then the fear of the wave disappearing begins to fade. So, letting go is not truly losing anything. It is not an act of subtraction, but an act of discovery. It is finding the truest, most vibrant life that has always been inside us, waiting to be revealed. It is realizing that the boundless space, the deep peace, and the inherent wisdom we seek are not somewhere else, but are the very essence of who we are. Perhaps you could try a small practice. For one day, gently notice every time you try to hold on to a specific idea of yourself or a situation. And for another day, simply practice letting go, even just a little, of expectations, of needing to be right, of worries about the past or future. Then listen quietly. Listen to what remains, to what feels truly real and unburdened within you.